All right. Thank you, Russ. Tina and Minda, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it. So this is a very interesting topic because like us here in Texas, you there in Raleigh, North Carolina, this is not a new thing, buyer representation agreements. And yet, like in Texas, I suspect that the vast majority of agents in your area do some variation of not signing the buyer representation agreement until we're ready to make an offer. And that buyer is super excited and they're giddy and they already understand your value. So they're like, yeah, sure. Which probably is why we're in part of the mess that we're in. But the two of you made a purposeful decision a while back to do it differently. Why?
Well, I like setting expectations in my business. So I think being able to set those expectations up front, and that way the buyer has a complete understanding of the process. So I'm here to kind of guide them through that process. So setting those expectations up front is just really a clear part in making that process as smooth as it can be.
Yeah. And for me, Bryon, it's like when you think about being in the business for 24 years, I started like one of those agents. I was, basically having the buyer lead the process, and every buyer led it differently. And then once you actually have a determination that your worth is there, then that cascades down to the buyer and you go, no, I'm going to show them what my process is. So for our team, the minute that we had agents that entered our world, it was like, no, you're worthy, you're valuable, and you should have a process. So we were really determined to make sure that they were very professional throughout our process so we could actually stand out and be different.
Yeah. And Tina, you and I were talking about this, and I was sharing, I think it's actually two choices that we as agents make, right? The first choice is to be treated as a professional. Mm-hmm. And that's just what we deserve. We do provide great service to our clients. We deserve the security of the relationship and the compensation that comes from that. Yep. The second choice is the choice to lead generate as an agent. Because if I don't have any prospects on the horizon and you're my only one, man, you're going to push me and pull me however you want to do it. But if you're one of many appointments I have that day and you don't choose to work with me in the terms that I feel like I deserve as a professional, that's okay. Let me refer you out, get my referral fee for you, work however you want to work with these other agents, and I'll go on about my business the way I need to in order to protect my time and build my business the way I need to. So here's the question I think that a lot of agents struggle with the buyer representation agreement is that expression of value, right? Mm-hmm. And so let me start by asking you, why would a buyer hire you? What's important for a buyer to work with you?
You want to take that, Minda?
Well, I think there's a lot of value that a buyer's agent can bring. And I think they are looking for someone to take that lead. That's where they're looking for the guidance. So my value is being able to take that leadership position in that role and give them guidance. I'm not here to ask them, what do you want to offer? What is your thought? They're looking for my insight. They're looking for somebody to take that, kind of alpha role in that and lead them through that process. So that is the value I bring. And that comes with showing confidence. It comes with knowing stats, knowing the market. And within, I have 30 seconds to make that impression. And usually within that 30 seconds, they know that I am the expert in the market and I can lead them through this process.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm going to ask you a follow-up about that. You said the stats and they know that I'm the expert. Give me a sense of what you mean by that. What stats do you share with them?
Well, especially like right now, we're getting into spring market and we're in a lot of multiple offer situations. So we have what's called a due diligence fee that can be a very tricky thing because it's high, it's a lot of money, it's non-refundable. So there's a lot of risk in our state that buyers take. And so, they're looking for stats and what's the average? What are you seeing when we're making multiple offers? I know the percentage, hey, this is about what I'm seeing in this area that you're going to have to bid over asking so that we can win this offer. This is the amount that you're probably going to have to put down as a non-refundable fee to get this. So those are some of the stats, but then also they want to know, like, what are the trend if they're going to invest this much, what are we looking for future investments? So I would say there's not just one area I've got to know the whole picture.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny. As listing agents, we go to the kitchen table bragging about 3 stats, right? Percent list to sell, days on market, and how many homes I've sold in the area. And by the way, newer agents, I say I, could be we, right? EXP, could be I, me, the solo agent, could be us, the team, right? Whatever the case might be, we brag about those stats at the kitchen table. What's interesting is now we, as Leo and Holly so well put the other day, we have to treat our buyer consultations like listing appointments, right? So can we come to the table with the stats that you're talking about? And also too, can we brag about our own stats? How much we save our buyers on percent list to sell versus the market average? How we help them only see a few homes, which by the way is a great positioning thing for you not to be a taxi cab driver, to be able to tell them on average, I only show my buyers 5 homes before they're ready to make an offer because I listen and I only put homes that are going to match their criteria. Right. Great stats to bring to the table. And I love your thoughts on that. So when you talk about your value, Tina, how you express it. So Minda shared a little bit, anything to add to how you share your buyer value to the buyers?
Well, I think, of course, somebody can look at me and say, well, you've been in the market so long. So of course, market knowledge, knowing that product that you're selling like the back of your hand, negotiation skills, how good are you at negotiations? Because that's truly what the buyer is hiring you to do. So if I go into an attorney's office, I want to see the skill level, the years in the market. Are they going to get me through this negotiation process with strategy? Are they a strategist? So it's the ability to streamline that buyer process, support them every step of the way of the journey. So showing them from here to here, I'm going to get you through, articulate my value with the least amount of bumps, and then showcasing your track record. If you're a brand new agent and you're not on a team, which right now we are on a team, and I think the team model is so important right now because Minda could go to a Slack channel and see exactly where things are. She can show her buyer a pulse of, hey, the last 15 offers our team made, this is probably what's trending. If you're a solo agent, lean into your peers at EXP, create a mastermind group where you can all Slack together. It's so important to have that communication right now, to have the intel, because if you're selling 4 homes a year, I promise you somebody like Minda is going to have more intel on the pulse of the market than the 4 deal a year producer that's doing 1 a quarter. So you have to connect with your peers and start to use those case studies for your knowledge base to be able to recommend what the buyer should do at this point.
That's right. The power of this company are the agents within it and leverage that. I mean, honestly, folks like yourself are so generous with their hard-won wisdom. Yes, absolutely. So I've got an interesting follow-up question. So we talked about what value you express. How do you express that value? In other words, are you doing that at the one home that they called to meet? And are you just verbalizing that, or are you sitting down with them with a formal presentation and you've got a buyer consultation packet? How do you go about doing that?
So, well, most of the time we're meeting them, first of all, at the home that they want to see. And that's the first time that I have to put my best foot forward and show my value. And I'm also bringing my presentation there. So it's not going to be as in length as I'm going to do it the second time during like a strategy session that we talk about, but I'm going to bring out that agreement and I'm going to show them if we want to work together, this is what the process will be. I even, take a point to highlight the fees that will be included so that this is the first time that they are meeting me and I'm going to set that expectation right up front.
Yeah. And in our state, I mean, we have a working with agents brochure. That is something that legally we have to show them, even if they're not prepared to sign anything. They literally have to sign that they're not prepared to sign anything because that demonstrates the fact that we've shown them how agency works. So North Carolina is I think a very professional, driven state. And so they want to make sure that the advisors are doing what they should to at least inform the seller or the buyer. And I do love that Minda does always bring her presentation, and that's your time to shine. I always tell our partners, hey, they walked into your house. They called you. You have to control that process to say, hey, Bryon, it was so great to meet you. Since we have a few minutes, I would like to share with you the process, because you're going to be walking, you're going to be looking at a lot of homes with a lot of different agents possibly. And I want to demonstrate what it would be like working with me. Is it okay if I show you that process now? It's your time. Take advantage of it. So you're, like Minda said, be the alpha, be in control. They want to be led. And everybody that meets Minda, they're not walking out with not wanting to use Minda as their agent, because they feel her confidence and the structure that she's going to bring. And they would be foolish to just kind of go with an agent that's sort of like that door opener, that's a little intimidated to take control of the process.
Of course they would. I mean, look at her. How could you not say yes?
Well, I was going to say that takes confidence. Like, I can't go in there and be stumbling upon my words or not know what I'm doing. I have to come in with not only confidence, but it's definitely a mindset shift. So, I can't be telling myself, oh, what if they don't see the value? I'm there to say they are going to see the value, and I am worth it, and they want to pay me for my value that I bring. So, not only is it the words that I'm articulating, but it's the confidence and the mindset that I have to present when I've got them at the kitchen counter. So
that's right. In my experience, confidence comes from mastery. Mastery comes from practice, right? And so if you're not practicing a great buyer consultation today, you really need to get involved with the university, watch some of the videos, some of which you're going to be seeing Minda and Tina in pretty shortly here with the new training we're about to release, but master that presentation. So we talked a little bit about how you're doing these today. And again, you're a break from the norm, actually getting people to sign the buyer rep agreement before you get into the taxi cab mode. Now, the NAR settlement is going to force us to change that even more, right? Before we can even open the door, they're going to have to sign that buyer rep agreement. Is that going to change how you operate in terms of, are we still going to the property, but we're going to do that form out on the driveway, or are we going to close for the consultation instead? How are you planning to adapt?
I don't know if we've really gotten quite that far, and I'm sure we're going to have to pivot a couple directions, and we may fail forward a little bit before we, figure out a really great process. That's how we all learn and grow. But I think, even like I'm thinking in my head, even like we do our listing presentations, we do a pre-qual qualification call with them, right? And we kind of set that expectation. So maybe it's mimicking that and doing more of a pre-qualification call right up front with them, so that expectation is set. Because I don't think meeting them into the driveway and pushing something in front of them is probably the best way to handle that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, again, to Leo and Holly's point, we have to start thinking of our buyers now as sellers as well. And just like you would do a pre-qual with a seller over the phone to find out the details you need to do the CMA and also their motivation and everything else, I think you have to do that now with buyers, and closing to a buyer consultation, whether it's, at your office, somewhere neutral before you go to those properties. You're going to have to figure it out.
I agree.
It's sort of like, think of it this way. If we were to go to a seller or talk to a seller over the phone, they said, hey, I want to understand what the value of my home is. I can't do that over the phone. I can't service them correctly. So it's just standard that we go to the house, we meet first, we see what their needs and wants are. It's just going to become standard and elevate the level of service on the buy side to say, hey, things have changed, the landscape's changed, and this is our new process. And we have to understand if this is going to be a win-win, and we want to work with each other. And so you get to interview me and I get to interview you. And then this is a big decision for you, Mr. Buyer. And so when people pay, they pay attention. And I think what's going to happen is buyers are going to have a higher level of expectation. They're going to be more discerning, and they're going to be the ones that say, whoa, if I have to pay anything, stop the brakes. I want to meet with Minda before I go see a house, because I don't want to be locked into any Joe Schmo that's not going to represent my best interest. So I think the buyers are actually going to have a mindset shift that they're going to push the meetings faster than we push them back. That's my feeling.
I think you're actually right about that. And that's not something we as an industry are actually thinking about right now. I think we're all a little shell shocked and we're not thinking about the positives of it.
Mhm.
So when it comes to the buyer rep agreement or buyer broker agreement, whatever you call it in your state, how do you explain that to a potential client? And I'm really curious about the compensation portion of it. Like, do objections come up? Are you proactive in handling those before they even come up? Tell me a little bit about how you approach that.
So I would say at first, the first time that we're meeting, I don't get a lot of objections, but I'm explaining that it's in their best interest because in our state, by default, all agents automatically work for the seller until they have an agreement and give permission to work with that buyer's agent. So I definitely tee it up that this is for your protection because if we go to a house and you ask me to call up the listing agent and ask questions, I don't have your permission to work for you until we've signed that agreement. And so I'm very upfront to give them that information. And the first time it's really just more informative. So they're meeting me. We're kind of in that interview process, like when you're meeting a seller for the first time. So I would say any objections that I get are going to be when we're making that decision and we're making that finalization to really go through the contract. Even then, I would say I'm not getting a ton of objections because in our market, we don't get our full professional fee that's normally at the full percentage. So there is usually a lesser amount that the buyer is responsible for and agrees to pay me.
Wow, so you're actually getting paid by the buyer today in some instances.
Many instances. Hmm.
In many instances, that's
Hmm.
amazing. And so, whatever your commission rate, we're not going to talk about that, but so
Right.
you have a set amount, and that's not what's coming from the list side seller's compensation for the buyer. So when you talk to your buyers about that, are you just giving them the form saying, "Here, read this real quick," and waiting for them to get done, or how are you presenting that?
Absolutely not. So no. Yeah, so the first time that they see it is when we've met at the house, they've selected a tour, they want to see a house. So that's the first time I give them a copy and I circle the important information. I circle what is my professional fee and I let them know here's kind of what we'll be seeing. Of course, we won't be seeing that number anymore, but I let them know that there are many situations that full amount isn't going to be covered and there will be a deficit that will be needed to kind of make that full commission percentage complete. And at that point in time, I've already planted that seed. The
Yeah.
next time when we actually go to either do a strategy session or we are going through the contract, I never put a contract in front of someone, send it off to Dot Loop. We are going to pull that contract up and we are going to walk through it step by step. So that is not going to be, just like we were in person. I know that like the back of my hand, and we're going to go through it. And at that point in time, I may or may not get an objection, but that's where I would say they start to ask some of the questions.
I love that. And I'm curious. I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit
That's okay.
here. Do you mind kind of walking me through, maybe role play a little bit with me? So I'm your buyer. We had this conversation. You
Mhm,
you did prepare me. I knew that that was a potential,
mhm.
and yet I probably wasn't hoping for that to happen. So the compensation from the buy side, from the seller, is not what it needs to be to complete your compensation, whatever that is. How do you have that conversation with me?
So if we're I guess so if we're going from the very beginning, I have explained that. I've explained how that professional fee works. I've explained that breakdown. I want to make sure that they have a clear understanding. So I'm letting them know that, and I have it like right in front of me. This is what I show them. This is my professional fee that my firm will seek my compensation from the cooperating firm. And if that compensation is ever less than that amount, then at that point in time, I would disclose to you the difference and we would fill out a disclosure of compensation. And then you would agree to pay whatever that difference is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Most of the time, the answer is a yes. And at that point, it's the first time. So then when we get into a house or we're getting in, I've planted that seed. I've made that very clear and set that expectation. I will even have buyers come to me with the MLS sheet and they will say, oh, we've already calculated in that this is how much we have to bring to the closing table in addition, I know I've done my job, you know?
Wow, that's amazing.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the
Now,
thing I was going to say,
no, go right ahead.
I wanted to add real quick to that. The one thing that, we're getting the gap. If there's let's just call it a 2.5%, we want 3 or 3.5%. The gap is what we've been successful at managing. What we haven't been successful at, because we haven't had to, is if Minda or myself had to go after, well, let's just, for example purposes, a 3% commission, that's going to be new to navigate. And so really we start already thinking about conversations of the buyer understanding that that fee has always been included in, just what they're financing, what the seller's looking at, whether it's 5% or 6%. And when we start going out to properties and speculation and looking at a $400,000 listing that's offering 6% and a $400,000 listing that's offering 3%, there's going to be different variables that the buyer has to think about based on how they're structuring their offers now. If we can get them to understand that they've always packed that into the deal, it's just going to be different conversations to make them feel a little bit alleviated that it's just always been there. It's just that it was easier to throw it on the seller side. You were paying for it. Now it's going to be on the buy side, and it's going to be a strategy based on what are we going after? What is the seller's needs? Do we need these closing costs? And I think it's just going to be, again, a mental conversation versus like, oh my God, I can't pay this. So I think we're going to be able to navigate it, but we have to have strategic conversations and really help the buyer understand why this professional fee is important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I take two things away from that. The first is that old expression that conflict arises when expectations are not met.
Mm-hmm.
And expectations are set by communication.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge thing. And I hear you being proactive, and I hear you being very communicative. The second thing I take away from this is, look, gang, everybody out there in the world, there's others who've lived before you. Learn from them. And so thank you very much for showing that. All right. Last word is yours. Any parting thoughts you have for buyer agents or even listing agents as we steer into this new world?
No, I just think that sometimes change is always hard, but I'm looking at this as a positive thing. I think that if we set those expectations and we become the professional in this business, I think that this is a great thing. We should have, we have been doing this, so let's just clean it up and let's make this a very positive experience for buyers and set those expectations right up front and make it a very professional business.
Love that.
Yeah. And my thoughts are, after 25 years in the business, it's cyclical. There's always something. Nobody could have, ever imagined COVID, where we had to pivot and wear masks and spray everything and change the way that the landscape was at that point. And guess what? We sold a lot of houses. We're so resourceful as a society. The one thing I really want to really settle in agents' minds is this is not just door openers and pushing paper. This is such an emotional management process. We are managing emotions more than we're managing paperwork and process. And so buyers and sellers have already agreed for the last 50 years that they want full service brokers involved in their transactions, because you can sell a house by yourself and you can buy a house by yourself. You literally can run to Staples and do all of those on your own. You can, if you want to go to court and represent yourself, you can still do that too. But that's a silly strategy. So to put a strategist in place, a negotiator in place, I do believe our value will be here. We're just going to have to change our words and demonstrate our value in a different way to a buyer. But I do believe they're going to want us. They're just going to expect us to elevate our language patterns, our service, and our processes. And they're going to be happy to pay. Now, there's still going to be negotiations, as there always were. But again, Minda's going to be able to set her value, and she's going to get to decide what that is.
That's right. Very well said. And I do think that there are huge opportunities for us in this market. if you're a skill-based, learning-based agent. And so thank you both for being here to help upgrade our skills as EXP. And to all of you out there, over the next coming weeks, we're going to be releasing a lot of training, interviews, podcasts, you name it. Tune into KGCI Radio, look to the university, look what Michael Valdez and Glenn and Leo and all the gang are doing to help bring you real-time information as this is evolving. Plug in. This is the time to upskill, because those who do are going to win their unfair share of business in this market. Tina and Minda, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys. Back to you, Russ.